I cannot believe that we're already in the back half of 2024.
Are you kidding me?
But here we are. Before you know it, the calendar will be turning again, and that means we are already getting ready for 2025 conferences, and one that I'm personally very excited to attend, again, is the Insights EDU conference. If you care at all about growing enrollment and building a student-centered higher ed experience, you really should be at this conference. Registration is now open, so secure your spot while early bird pricing is still available. Visit insightsedu.com for more information and to register. That's visit insightsedu.com for more information and to register.
Hey everybody, this is Elvin Freitas, co-founder of the EdUp Experience, and today we are extremely excited to announce our paid subscription service. By subscribing today, you will get exclusive early access to ad-free episodes, extended episodes, bonus episodes, original content. That's right, original content and invites to special events, all while helping to sustain EdUp. To become a subscriber, go to edupexperience.com. That's EDUP experience.com and subscribe to our free email newsletter to learn how you can get access. Again, go to edupexperience.com. That's EDUP experience.com.
Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. This is Dr. Joe Salustio back with you again and again. We're getting to the point, and I keep saying on each episode that I record, but we're really getting close to 1,000 episodes of this podcast, which I don't know if that's something we celebrate or look at each other, Elvin and I, and wonder why. But it has been a long 4 years, but it seems that 1,000 episodes would be hard to achieve in a 4-year period. Alas, it is not. We are marching fast and furiously towards 1,000 episodes. If you did not know, the EdUp Experience has started a subscription service, and that's to help sustain this incredible work that we do. It's It's $2.99 a month. But what it does do, if you want to pay us $200, you can. But what the subscription it does do is we do some mini episodes only available to subscribers with the guests that we have on this podcast, and allows you to get insights not available to everyone else. We also have some original content. Elvin's getting on the mic more often now, so you'll not want to miss out on some of the things we have going on for our subscribers, but that's a conversation for another day. The conversation we're going to have today, we're bringing back a common, I would say he's a common guest co-host. I've maybe going on 30, 35, 40 episodes with him at this point. Ladies and gentlemen, let's bring him back to the mic. He's Douglas Carlson. He is head of partnerships at Lead Square. Douglas, welcome back.
Oh, it's great to be on here, and it's amazing. Kind of, I'm adding those things up on my fingers, and sure enough, yeah, we're well over 30 at this point.
Yeah. So the last time I saw you to connect the tissue here before I bring in our guest, the last time I saw you, Douglas, we were at the Career Education College and University Annual Conference. I have no idea where we were. I cannot remember. I think it was Dallas. Was it Dallas?
We were in Indianapolis, and actually during the time when the Olympians were swimming to qualify for the Olympics, which is kind of fun.
And we were right at the point where we recorded over 3 days, and on that third day, they finally announced my new job at Ellucian. And so for 20 episodes, I couldn't talk about it with anyone, and it was burning me up inside. I whispered to you, and you're like, "Congratulations, dude!" And then we would do these episodes, and I couldn't talk about it. And that's the last time I saw you. And now I'm excited to be here. I've been in Ellucian for a couple of 1 month and a couple of days, and happy to have you back as we bring on our guest. And I've been waiting to get him on because he does some interesting stuff at Ellucian. Here he is. He's Jeff Dinski. He is the Chief Strategy and Corporate Development Officer at Ellucian. Jeff, welcome to NetUp. Mike, how are you?
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me. Really excited to go on. I couldn't help, I must say, you guys were talking, feel like significant inferior, because you were talking about like your 1,000 podcast and approaching that just on this one. And Doug's co-hosted for 30, and I'm sure been on others. This is actually my first podcast appearance ever. So
it is not.
It is.
Get out of here.
No, really. I am very excited about it. My largely millennial team is very excited for me. Yeah, I'm excited too. And so try to go easy on me.
Well, one thing I forgot to tell you at the beginning that I tell other guests is that I use in-episode sound effects. So had I been told you that and been ready, I would have hit this button.
Are you kidding me?
About your first podcast. I mean, you know what? We're going to set the bar high, Jeff. We're going to set a high bar. No podcast will ever be as good as your first.
And we do work together now, and we actually haven't talked much about the podcast generally, but I picked up on the in episode sound effects already, so I'm disappointed you were slow on the trigger there.
Me too. Now that you called me out, Jeff, I'm going to make this harder than ever. No, let's start. I'm going to do this as objective as possible because I want to talk about Ellucian too. But this is your moment to talk about Ellucian. What do they do? How do they do it? And what's your role? And what do you oversee?
Yeah, sure. So. For those of you who don't know, Ellucian is the largest provider of something called the ERP system. That includes 3 components: HR, finance, and the student information system. And we're the largest provider in the US. We have about 50% of all US higher ed institutions using our core software. And then abroad, we're in 51 countries, not as scaled there, but 2,900 institutions overall using our product. So one way to think of this, and I always tell this, that I've been at my job for almost 2 years, so I like telling my parents and like cocktail parties, this job's actually pretty easy to explain because everyone knows kind of higher ed has been the college, and I like to explain us as like the operating system for colleges and universities, right? It's where you get your student information, financial aid, grades, employee information, finance, right? And I think that's what we do. I think we're specifically and focused really on sort of driving student success. Our mission, to just kind of get it in there, because I think it's super relevant, is to power higher education so institutions can empower student success. And so we're increasingly thinking about, while our direct customer is the institution, not the higher ed college or university, they're our buyer, but we really think about our software enabling those institutions to drive real outcomes with their students, whether it be recruiting, which we were talking a little bit before we got on, but fundamentally around like schools are looking to do a couple of things, right? Which is to retain students and then help them obtain degrees, right? And I think that's stuff that we are really focused on and try to do well. Does that make sense?
Amazing.
Makes sense to me. When you get down to brass tacks, Jeff, you say it. Institutions want to recruit and enroll students, retain them, and get them jobs and have good outcomes. And there's a lot that goes into that. From a strategy perspective, as the Chief Strategy and Corporate Development Officer, can you talk a little bit about the scope of your position? What do you have eyes on, so to speak, in the industry?
Sure. Happy to do it. I think I should mention, right, because we think about our core product being our student system, the student information system, SIS, if you will. You'll hear me say it probably by default, because we use a lot of acronyms around Ellucian in what I would describe as a somewhat annoying way, though SIS is a pretty common one. So for the listeners, if they don't know what that is, that's what it is.
We do that in all across higher ed too, so we're all on the same page.
Yeah. So my role specifically, my title is wordy. I think we should probably shorten it. Chief Strategy and Corporate Development Officer. So at a high level, I'm responsible. The way I would think about it is I'm responsible for kind of fundamentally 2 things, which is our outward looking view of the market. So what's going on in the market, how we interconnect with people, understanding the market, understanding what's going on. And then 2, driving our growth strategy, right? And so where do we want to play in new markets? What products do we want to invest in? And the fundamental way we drive that, which is a little bit of a business jargony term, but I think makes sense generally, is I think about it as like our buy, build, partner strategy, right? So my team will identify the growth areas. We'll then go out and say, hey, do we want to do an acquisition there? Which is a topic I think we'll get to later. We did one called EdUp in March. Do we want to partner? And there's great examples of where we're better off partnering. Our payment processors like TouchNet, our transcript solution providers like Parchment, and National Student Clearinghouse are 2 big examples. Or are we going to work with Mike Wolf, our chief product and technology officer, and identify an internal product, and they're going to build it. And a good opportunity there where we work together. And I'd love to talk about our incubation is something we have cooked up that'll come out later this year called Journey, which is fundamentally a non-degree and continuing education platform that we're really excited about. And so I think of my thing of driving the overall corporate strategy, driving alignment within the organization, and then really looking at growth opportunities. On a more basic level, I kind of oversee 5 functions: corporate development, corporate strategy, which does a lot of that, our global partner team, thought leadership, and market intelligence, and then marketing as well. So
tell them like it is.
I want to just ask you one more bit, and then I'll hand it over to Douglas, because we talked beforehand, and he said he was going to come with the fireball question. So
great! I'm excited about it. How many podcasts do I have to do before I get access to the sound effect buttons?
There's a super secret agreement that has to be signed to have access to the sound effect buttons, but we're going to talk about it, Jeff, because I do trust you with it. I trust you with this magic machine that I have.
Okay.
But FAFSA, let's just talk about FAFSA simplification for a little bit. And for anybody who doesn't know, you just had an article come out, you and Mike Wolf were talking about the FAFSA. It hasn't been so simple this cycle. And as you think about corporate strategy, you're looking at institutions all of the time, and you're hearing about what's happening to institutions, what's happening to students, what's happening to the industry, right? Because you have to have eyes on what's going on in higher ed in total. What's your assessment of where things are right now, the consequences of simplification, what's happened to institutions? What do you think is going to happen? Give us your 30,000-foot view of where things stand.
Yeah, I mean, I think on the FAFSA thing specifically, and then I'll sort of broaden it out to kind of higher ed a little bit. I think FAFSA specifically, right, as Joe mentioned, our chief product and technology officer and I co-authored an article that got published in eCampus News about the challenges that happened this year. I think the Department of Ed has been pretty open about kind of it not going very well, and I think are working pretty diligently. They've made some changes to try to make sure it goes better the next time. But a lot of what we focused on in the article was not really backwards looking, right? Like, there's no question it was like a massive problem this year, but I think going forward it'll be better. Yeah, train wreck. You should have a train wreck sound effect. And I think, but like thinking about the system in general, right? And I think one of the things I would highlight, we also published kind of a thought leadership white paper earlier this year on student financial health and success. And one of the things that really struck me in that report about sort of the impact of financial aid to students is 44% of the students that we surveyed said just $5,000 more in aid would change where they went to school. And if you think about that in the scale of, college bills that are now, all in room and board, $75,000, $80,000 a year, they're not talking about $5,000 a year, they're talking $5,000, right? It's like less than 10% of their overall cost of the bill. And I think if you think about the impact of that back to the student, right? If all of a sudden you're put in a situation where you don't know where you're getting aid from, it's not clear if it's coming at all, it's really going to limit your opportunities, right? And I think that's what we saw happen this spring. And that's why, like, we wrote about it, because I think Mike and I just felt like we're obviously on the technology side, but like, tragedy is overstated, but this is close to that for a group of students that, really are trying to unlock opportunities for their future in a really key stage of their life. And I think just to call this out, right? I think financial aid affects everyone because, like, obviously schools are quite expensive. So I think sometimes people think about financial aid and think about like really sort of lower income students and parents getting that, but it goes much farther up the chain than that. And I think we have to recognize the impact. That said, it really does affect low income students and families more, right? And then you're getting into an equity issue of, because there's an overlap there, it also affects minorities more and those kind of things. And so I think it's not just an issue around sort of students in general, but there's also sort of an equity and access issue associated with this that I think is really important to think about how we address going forward. The other thing I would say about financial aid is I think the thing that people don't realize, and this is where we do sit from a technology side, and I think can have a unique perspective. We talked about this in a piece, is I think people think about like FAFSA and federal financial aid just being the federal aid, whether it be Pell Grants or student loans, when in reality, there's a whole bunch of other aid sources, whether it be grants from the school or private loans. The thing that people don't realize who are not really inside baseball is the FAFSA form and the federal student loans and the ICERs that get passed along with them are the first step in that. So they're the gate to all the funding, whether you want to go to Princeton gives everyone like full need, right? Based on grants, like nobody has any loans. It screwed up Princeton too, because they needed that FAFSA information to unlock the need for that, right? So it's not just the federal loans that got affected. And that's why I think it sort of snowballed into such a big problem. And so that's kind of looking back. The part we did looking forward, right, was look, like I think the system we have, and I think it's come under some duress, and I can talk about that a little later because I think it relates to some of the challenges in higher ed. I love the fact that the federal government funds higher ed in the various ways they do. So like no challenge to the fundamental idea of this. Is not about like should higher ed fund it. I think they absolutely should, and I'd like to see more of it. I think what we talked about is, do you even need the FAFSA reform in the sense that, is there an easier way to do this, right? Like, could you pull directly from tax returns? Could you replicate data from our systems, from the other SIS systems, so you can really simplify that form? And if you think about what happened this year, it was all about sort of processing the data around that. If all that data was in there already, like it wouldn't solve all the problems that happened this year, but it would solve some of them. So I think I want to continue to encourage, we don't have direct control, but the Department of Ed, the big technology providers working with the Department of Ed, to continue to think progressively about it and not just be refining the existing system, which bluntly this change was, and really think about, are there ways we can use technology? Are there ways we can use integration to come up with a new system that really simplifies it for everyone?
That's a great thought. Douglas?
Yeah, I think that's well said. Well, you obviously spent a lot of time thinking about the market. So we've talked about FAFSA, which is like one of the 3, maybe 4 big legs of the stool. The other ones, kind of talking about higher education, is the fiscal cliff, which I think is a little bit more of like it's not not fiscal cliff, excuse me, the enrollment cliff, which is more of like a enrollment decline than a cliff. But with that said, still important topic. And the third one seems to be AI. Before we dive into either one of those, because you have such an interesting spot looking at the market, is there anything that's a 3-legged stool? Is there a 4th leg or a 5th leg that people should be thinking about and talking about? Because those seem to be the big topics, but there's always something out there that people are missing.
Yeah, I would say the other one, and this one hits close to sort of my background, and obviously they're all interrelated, right? Use the metaphor
Sure.
of the 3-legged stool. The other one to me is sort of the value of the degree and the rise of kind of non-degree credentials and skill-based credentials. And I think it connects, very directly potentially to some of the enrollment decline and some of the broader challenges in higher ed, but that would be my 4th one as like a really important one.
Got it. Well, and perhaps then we start there, because the lens you're looking through is obviously also a technology lens. I'd be curious from either your perspective or from like Ellucian's perspective, how are you thinking about sort of the value-based degree? I think we touched on it a second ago with maybe one of the companies you recently purchased. How do you think about some of the value in some of those maybe non-degree based programs, values created there?
Yeah, and I think this connects a little bit to, we can get to the enrollment decline, but some of the challenges that you're seeing higher ed institutions face in terms of scale and in some extreme cases, financial viability, right? And so the way I would think about it, one thing we didn't talk about with my background that I think is a little bit relevant here is prior to coming to Ellucian about 2 years ago, I was a partner at a strategy consulting firm that was totally focused on education. Titan Partners, quick plug for Titan. Like I was there 6 years. It was a super great experience. They still do great work. So I would encourage
we had
anyone.
Kathy Shaw on not too long ago.
Oh, good. Kathy Shaw, I hired at Titan and still a close friend. So, but like just encourage anyone out there, since I'm not plugging Ellucian, if you guys are looking for support or strategy support, they do really great work over there. But prior to that, I'd spent 4 years at the time, a small education technology company, not so small anymore, called Parchment, which you guys may know is in kind of transcript transfer and non-degree and electronic credentials. I really stumbled at. I used to be better at the Parchment pitch.
You don't need to be good at the Parchment pitch.
Yeah, I'm still pretty good at it, but like not as good as I was. And so I was overseeing kind of our consumer facing product team, among other things there. And so we spent a lot of time thinking about like the sort of transferability and storage and value and viability of kind of credentials and how you could break them down and how you could give more control to the consumer, which is something I really believe in. I think historically, education has been a very institution-centric business. Like if you think about the way vendors sell, and one of the things, I come from more of a consumer media background, I think we need to continue to think about the student as not only a student, but as a customer, right? And I think other areas, you just have much more control of your stuff, right, than you do in education. And I think we're always kind of thinking about like, how do you show, to Doug's question very directly, the value of a non-degree credential? How does it relate to degrees? Because I think the one thing you can make a lot of criticism, and look, I've got, my college degree is serving well, so I'm super appreciative of that. And I think there's a ton of values in them. But the one thing, even if you disagree with some of the value of college degrees, the one thing that's clear is everyone understands what a college degree means, right? So like when we hire, you don't always get exactly what you're thinking. Employee hiring's hard, but you do understand that having graduated college means a certain set of things. It means probably you write decently well, right? It means that you've had some base background on sort of politics and sort of cultural stuff. It probably means, though not in all case, that you can do math at a competent level, right?
Except in Douglas's case.
Yes. No, we've got a few people.
A notable exception.
That's a fact.
Yeah.
That's a fact.
So I think like it really goes back to, I think the key to unlocking the value of non-degree credentials, whether it be short courses or boot camps or corporate training or continuing education, is to really have the employers in particular understand what they mean, right? And I think what you need to have them understand what it means is to start to see them transferred a bit or traded on, right? So like the way I think about it is like if it's side by side, the reason college degrees worked is people hired a bunch of people from college and they're like, hey, they're pretty good, right? Yeah. It's why there's still a bias or a preference, depending on your perspective, to hiring people from elite schools, right? They've had a pattern of hiring there, and maybe there's some bias for other reasons, and I can see that argument. But generally it comes to, we hired people from there and they were pretty good. And I think where you'll really see non-degree credentials pick up is if employers start using them in scale. And then I think you'll have to see higher ed institutions and maybe other people respond. So that's kind of, and I think we're sort of, one of the things that was always, I mean, like, congrats to Matt Patinsky and team at Parchment. They built an amazing business while I was there. Hopefully I contributed a little bit, but certainly after I left. But one of the things that always frustrated me while I was there is like, I kind of felt like we were ahead of the curve on the thinking. And I think the reason I brought that up is I think we're actually at a bit of an inflection point, and I don't know whether it's going to take 6 months or 2 years, but it's maybe not much further than that, where you're going to see some of these non-degree credentials get picked up a little bit more and utilized. And you're seeing this a little bit in big tech already. So I do think that's the key to unlocking them. So let me pause there and see if you guys have more questions.
Well, I want to add to that because I think you hit on something that's really important. And we understand structure as human beings, right? We know that a bachelor's degree has some accreditation behind it, and there's some outside vetting company that says, yeah, this is decent. And so if somebody gets it, it lowers my risk as an employer, which hiring, a lot of hiring practices is all about risk management, lowering my risk so I can end up with a decent employee. And to your point, unless you're like a big box company, you're like, big brand, Google, Amazon, I recognize that. I know what that is. But there are so many companies that are trying to get into the non-credential game. And for an institution, the financial model doesn't work, by the way. I can't just go out and charge $249 for a bunch of credentials because that's not the way my business is structured. And then if a student goes out, adult student, traditional student goes out to get the credential, the employer doesn't know what the heck it is.
Exactly.
That's risk for them. So to your point, we do understand structure. And I think what's happening now is we do see more students challenging that structure, though, especially as AI comes on board and they have these digital tools around them. It's forcing us as institutions, I say us, higher ed, to level up our technology game. And by and large, we haven't done that over time. And now it's an imperative. Can you talk a little bit about the necessity of technology evolution? Calling all higher ed marketing and enrollment management professionals. Hear, hear. The Insights EDU conference is back. This is your chance to level up your marketing and enrollment management strategies, and the EdUp Experience podcast will be there once again. Join us at the Ritz-Carlton, New Orleans, February 12th through 14th for an unforgettable conference. Registration is now open with early bird pricing.
Outstanding.
Hey everybody, this is Elvin Freitas, co-founder of the EdUp Experience. Are you enjoying the conversation so far? Good, I hope so. Did you know that you can actually hear this conversation early before anybody else and ad-free, so you don't have to hear my voice during these ads? And did you also know that you could get extended episodes, bonus episodes, original content? That's right, original content and invites to special events, all while helping to sustain EdUp? Well, if you didn't know, now you know. So go to edupexperience.com, that's EDUP experience.com, and become a subscriber today. First, you got to sign up to our free email newsletter, and then you'll find out how to become a subscriber. Again, go to edupexperience.com.
Sure. I mean, I think you hit on it, right? And I think I'll come back to this maybe at the end a little bit when I answer the question, but I don't think colleges are going to have a choice, right? I think they're going to have to evolve. And I think you said it really well. I would make one point as we head into kind of the presidential election and try to do this without antagonizing anyone. But like, despite the fact that I think we've got two political parties that have very different views of the world, are running on different positions, I think one of the challenges you'll see when you really think about it for higher ed is in some ways, the value of higher ed is being questioned by both sides of the political aisle, right? To use a specific example, right? The Republicans and President Trump as a candidate, like you'll hear a pretty consistent refrain around like, what are we teaching in schools? Are professors just liberal mouthpieces for ideas that we don't want? Like, how do we get free speech in schools? And I think that percolates through the system and people start to, you can agree or disagree with it, but people start to believe some of that because they see some evidence of it, right? It may not be true, but you hear it enough, it becomes true. Similarly, and I think this way is just as damaging, but I think a little less obvious on the Democrat side, again, whether you agree or disagree with Biden's push to forgive student loans, the talk track behind that has been pretty consistently from the Democrats. Hey, you got a bunch of people who took out loans, got degrees, and now can't find jobs that allow them to pay those loans down. Yikes. No matter how you spin it, that's calling into question the value of the degree in terms of an economic value. And they've been relentless pounding that point, right? Again, you can totally agree with the position. It doesn't change the impact it has on higher ed. And so I think if you think about the implications of that, for some people, degrees are still going to be great, right? If you're a PhD, if you're a data scientist, there's all sorts of examples. And I think for a lot of jobs, I think executive level or management level positions, whether it be big companies or small companies, I still think you're going to generally look for people with kind of liberal arts backgrounds who have degrees. Those things will transfer, but it's not going to be all jobs, right? And I think what you're going to have to see is as people start to question the value of some degrees, institutions are going to have to tact to these shorter courses. Things like statistics is a great example. One of the things we've heard from our kind of higher ed partners that they're focused on not necessarily implementing AI yet, and we can get to that later, but teaching AI, right? And I think those are the kind of things that institutions can do really well. I think to double back to Joe's question, I just think that's an important point to understand the pressure that's applied to the degree and to higher ed in general. On the technology side, the problem here, and this is where we're really at the heart of it, so we see this every day, is the systems, and not just the technology systems, though, like business processes within basically 98% of higher ed institutions, basically everywhere but the for-profits to some degree, and then big progressive schools like Southern New Hampshire, or ASU, or Western Governors, or Central Florida, as four examples. Their whole model, everything they do is about funneling credentials to the degree, right? And so if you start saying, hey, we need to launch non-degree credentials. I need a certificate in AI or certificate cybersecurity is another great example, right? Maybe you don't need a full degree in that. Maybe you need a couple years of training and you can be really effective. They need to, it's not as simple as just launching that program. They need to fundamentally overhaul, to your point, the funding and payment models, but also the technical systems and then the business processes, right? Like even academic departments, like provosts, they're really set up on like, what classes do we teach and what degrees do we give? It's not kind of how do we create non-degree programs. So there's just a big overhaul. I think technology, to be clear, like other things, can be a help and a facilitator to that, right? So I think one of the things I mentioned at the top that's timely here is one of the products that we've launched out of our incubation team is something called Journey, and it's taking what we've done on the student side in terms of core student management, degree management, and moving it to the non-degree side. So think of that as the operating system for a school's non-degree program. And it also uses a ton of AI to connect like classes at the school with skills. So what we're trying to do here is say, hey, these continuing ed classes get you these skills get you those jobs. And so we're trying to enable schools to do more of those sort of short courses, continuing ed, but also link it to their existing program. So I think technology can help. I think we're trying to lead the way on that, and I think we are. I'm really excited for this to come out to this fall. Congrats to Mike Wolf and Sonia Khan, who are the real drivers behind that. But I think institutions also have to be willing to change not just their technology, but their practices. Otherwise, they won't get there.
You said change in higher ed?
This is lunacy.
We got to work on that. Douglas?
Yeah, well, and you said so many like pretty profound things. So I'm going to loop back and kind of touch on a couple things. One, I don't remember which podcast episode it was, but it was really a nice thing that Joe kind of pointed out is education is inherently unbundled. The delivery systems are not. So, but effectively it is a stackable credentials. You know, you have the system that's been in place for 100 years, but in a lot of cases, it's a stackable credential piece that if we can get a delivery system that appropriately puts it together, that's really a bit more of the challenge, or how I think about it. And where this comes from a little bit is, Paul LeBlanc has since moved on from SNHU and just did an incredible job. But one of the visions sort of he had, which I loved, was the idea that at least for undergraduate day, you could be an online student, you could be a hybrid student, or you could be an on-campus student. And in a perfect world, that would be fluidly available to a student if they want to do a semester on campus to get that experience. That has a higher cost than just doing something purely online or a hybrid. And there's some world in which I think we need to go there, because so much of the cost is actually in the infrastructure itself at schools. Professors are not, at least again, my opinion, at least what I've read, is professors are not the cost problem at schools. It's really a lot of the other infrastructure that's around it. And so that it seems to be if there's way to
the rock climbing walls, if you will.
That's actually like the perfect example. Like we just don't need those.
Outrageous.
And so a lot of the things I'm kind of trying to synthesize a little bit of what we've been talking about here, but I'm wondering, and this is kind of coming back to a question, so give me a second, is knowing that effectively,
long question.
Yeah, very long question. You got to get out here. Costs in higher education is a huge problem. Like you kind of talked about the political pieces a while ago. Do you think that technology can be a helpful answer to that solution? I suspect the answer is yes, but I'd be curious how you think technology can help with the cost problem specifically in higher education.
Yeah, sure. Let me talk a little about. I would like to know, Joe, I don't know if this is possible. I know Doug has a job, but can we hire Doug too? Because it's not often I get called profound. And so like if we could have people calling me profound around the company more frequently, I think I would appreciate it.
We're gonna get a sound effect.
I'll just follow you around with a sign.
Yeah. So and then second, I'm trying to avoid the Ellucian plugs here, but hard to resist this one. You mentioned Paul LeBlanc. He actually just joined our board a few weeks ago. So I think it's a good illustration of how we're trying to hire kind of progressive thinkers, not only as employees like Joe and people who are really driving change, but also at our board level to continue to push us forward. So I'm really excited to have him aboard. I think it will make a big difference for us.
Surprise.
To answer your question directly, I think the impact of technology on the cost side of education is actually pretty limited for the reasons you said, right? So I think, the institutions already pay a lot for technology, and there's some ways to consolidate that, right? Like, I think we didn't talk about this earlier, but we not only have our ERP and student systems, but we have products in enrollment management, advising, advancement, degree management, EdUp. And, there's small ways institutions like as a company, from my business perspective, I want them to use all of our stuff, right?
Sure.
Not only because it's good for us as a business, but also because it becomes integrated. It's all part of the Ellucian platform and they can save money on it, right? And I think that matters from like an operational budgeting standpoint. Maybe you're able to put more money into education, a little bit more money in technology, but I don't think technology is a game changer on the cost side, precisely because of what you said, right? Most of the spend in higher ed is around facilities and personnel. And like any place, like maybe there's some ways you can sort of reduce personnel by using technology in spots, but I don't think it's big, right? I think where technology can have a huge impact on the financials of an institution is what we talked about before. Like, there's no question we can recruit students more efficiently. I have deep beliefs that students coming in who are dropping out can be retained, and that can be through microfinancial aid, better advising. And I think we can drive that to more degrees. And if you think about the financial impact on schools, like having that student who dropped out, like pay for 2 more semesters or fund 2 more semesters, that to me is going to have a far bigger impact on the finances of the school than on the cost side. And I think honestly, like schools have to make some decisions about what they want to be. I don't think we can help them that much, right? Like we joked about the rock climbing wall, but like, are you focused on student experience? I was saying earlier, maybe you should be, but like maybe you have to give up some of those things to get better in campus, right? Like it's just about how you spend your money. I think technology can probably save costs on the margins. I don't think it's the driver. The one area we haven't talked about that I think potentially could be some big cost savings from the technology is on the AI side. Though I do think that's further down the road, and I do think it will require to be a little provocative. And we've seen this, I think it's harder in higher ed than in businesses. I think institutions that want to use technology for cost savings are probably going to have to be willing to cut staff in spots. And for very good reasons, I'm not sure they always are.
You made me think of something too, because we talk about AI a lot. Bring on this, bring on that, automate tasks, and so on. But if you actually look at business model innovation in higher education, right? Because this is key, business model innovation. Because what we're doing right now doesn't always work. How do we take a product that maybe somebody is already not buying and make someone want to buy it? Well, you can't just put money behind it because they're already not buying it. You have to change how you're offering the product. And there are a lot of ways to offer products, right? Like there's online courses on a standard term. There's non-standard term. There's competency-based education. There's subscription-based Title IV now, which I can't believe how many people don't know about it. But there's borrower-based academic year packaging. And you start to get in all these ways of offering and packaging education. You have to have a piece of tech. You have to have a student information system that can do all of those things. And the reason I bring this up is because we go, oh, well, we could invest in this AI program. And I'll do talks, Jeff, and I'll go, but why do you want to go get some kind of AI program when you can't even do the basic
manage your existing technology?
Manage your key pieces of technology. And I think we're thinking wrong. We're thinking like we need something new and shiny, but we haven't even optimized what we already have.
And that's right. And I think I don't want to, for my own sake, my own job, I don't want to get any confusion on this. I think like Ellucian's products can provide a ton of monetary value to school, right? Like we do specific work. Vanessa's Tribusone's team on the marketing team, she does a really great job of kind of looking at the ROI of our implementations and showing the impact it can have on student retention, attainment, recruiting, the cost savings you can make on the team, right? So like, I think there's a ton of value in the Ellucian solutions, but it's what you said. It's about driving the value of the technology we have and maximizing it in the institution. So you're cleaning up your business processes, making it more efficient. So you're recruiting more students. So you're giving your advisors the best information. That's a good example, right? Like advising to me is an area where like we're still with love and affection to our higher ed system, and there are certainly some exceptions here. Like we're still in the 20th century here, right? It's a lot on paper. There's some reasons we can change it. That's where there's huge value in our system. It's also the ability to support it with less technology resources, right? Like one of the things we haven't talked about is a big, history of Ellucian and our predecessor companies, SunGard Higher Ed and DataTel, where they were on-premise systems, right? Ellucian now is a cloud-based software as a service, SaaS, if you will, system that enables so much efficiency at the school for you to unplug your DBA, your IT person to do what Joe said and go maximize your other systems, right? And so I think we're really excited about kind of our SaaS solutions and what it can do in terms of helping make a school more efficient, exactly like you said.
I get to say this. I think I get to say this because I co-founded the podcast, so I can do self-plugs if I want. But the one of the biggest reasons I wanted to come to Ellucian, and I chose to come to Ellucian, right? And there's a lot of reasons why, but one of the biggest reasons, Jeff, and I believe that a student information system is the most consequential choice a board or president will be involved in making for their institution. It will limit everything that you want to do if you make the wrong choice, and it will propel everything you want to do if you make the right choice. And I don't know, that's why I wanted to sidestep out of higher ed and come to ed tech, because I don't think everybody realizes that.
Yeah, exactly.
And I thought, how could I get to my colleagues and say, this is more consequential than anything else that you want to do? It is how you think about your future, not just about what your present is. And I want to go back to that piece that I talked about, business model innovation, because it's not just about our business model, it's about who we're serving. And a lot of times when we talk about these things, Jeff, we forget, every decision we have to make has to have students at the center. Every decision of an institution. And how do you ensure that the student is always at the center of the decision making of the work that you're doing? How do you think about it with your teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's been a shift for us, right? I think one thing is part of my role as kind of chief strategy officer to make sure our long-term vision is in the right spot. And so I kind of plugged our mission earlier, but I think it's partially the answer to your question. we feel so strongly about the student being kind of our end constituent, even though we work with our higher ed partners, right? I don't want to diminish them at all, that we put it in our mission. And that wasn't what we were before, right? And so the culminating thing in our mission is so institutions can empower student success. So we drive that mission home every day. We are very much a for-profit company. We are also very much a mission-based company, right? And like you, like me, not everyone there, but a lot of people work at Ellucian because they want to see drive real change in higher ed. And I think, as much as anyone else, maybe more than anyone else, if we do our jobs, we have the ability to drive that higher ed at scale. So one is we preach it, right? We hire people who are focused on students. We talk about it as a specific goal. Two, we started tracking metrics on this. I think I mentioned Mike Wolf a couple times. I think it's one because he does a great job leading our product and technology area, but Mike's really focused on tracking our student metrics around our experience platform, which is our entry into our and starting tracking not only how many schools are implementing, but how many students are using, right? So we prioritize it a goal, we track it as metrics, and then if you look at where we're building, right, we're focused both what I do and what Mike's team does, M&A, and our internal resources around products that are directly going to drive better student outcomes, right? We acquired EdUp in March that had 3 solutions. They're now labeled Ellucian Smart Plan, Ellucian Award, and Ellucian Transfer. Those are I'd love people to be able to demo Award. It's one of the coolest things I've seen because it takes a student set of credentials at a school and will tell them what degrees they've already earned, right? And so if you think about the power of that around things like reverse transfer or bringing in community colleges and making people get real value at higher ed, countering those forces we were talking about before in the political world to show that's hugely impactful and it directly impacts the student, right? One thing we were talking about the other day as we were doing a sales pitch is the transfer product is the same thing, but with transfer students, right? It basically builds articulation rules. So imagine a world where if you're coming out of a community college and you're transferring to a 4-year school, you can tell before you even enroll exactly what you're going to get credit for, right? That fundamentally changes your choice. It's so powerful, right? Now you have schools taking weeks upon weeks to sometimes tell students. We heard a story today about how students would transfer, enroll at the school, and not find out till they're already in classes what degrees they were getting credit for, what classes they were getting credit for. So I think
can confirm that's the case all across higher ed.
That's a very very common, unfortunately.
So from an acquisition standpoint, we're focused on, and I think if you think about that, one of the things we were talking about in the sales pitch of that is to get back to Doug's point on cross savings or how do you power, and I don't want to oversell it because I think this is the greatest product it's an awesome product, but a lot of that value actually accrues to the student, not the school, right? Because if you're getting credit for classes you've already earned, it doesn't really help the school from a financial standpoint. It helps them massively from a mission standpoint, right? And schools are still mission-based, but that's a really good example of how we're putting the student first in the product. I think I talked about Journey too. That interface is all built around how do we give student a great experience and understanding how their degrees and non-degree credentials lead to skills. And so it's really 3-pronged. It's in our mission. We're tracking it in metrics, anytime you set as a goal. And then from a product development and M&A standpoint, that's where we're investing.
Douglas, what'd you think about this conversation, man?
Oh, this was fantastic. And also I just wanted to reflect a couple things back. So I think mission statements very much have go in and out of vogue, but they're incredibly powerful when you connect them to actual actions. And I just want to kind of tip my hat to you to doing exactly that. And then also reflect back to you that one of the things you said, I think is pretty profound again, is you do well by doing good. And what I mean by that is if you can help institutions help students be more successful, therefore graduate, therefore do their mission, that extra semesters ultimately helps their financial line. And that's the bottom line. And that's ultimately, it's not going to completely solve all these problems, but that is effectively what your mission at Ellucian is to help students be more successful. And you named products to that point that help you do that. So really well done, just wrapping that all up in a bow.
Oh, thanks. Appreciate it.
We're going to need to go to the judges here, since this is Jeff's first podcast. We're going to have to go to the judges and see how he performed, if he performed well enough to take over the soundboard. Judges?
You just made the list!
Yay! I'm very excited for the soundboard. I'm sure my team will not be excited for the soundboard because they probably do not need any more of me harassing them on calls with an additional thing of soundboard. But yes, I will hold you to that for sure. I thought we're in the Olympic season. I thought I was gonna get like a diving score or something.
Oh, no. But maybe I'll have one for next time that you come on. But I do want to let you have an open mic to close us out. Jeff, take a couple minutes. Is there anything else that you want to say about Ellucian, about your role, anything going on globally that you think would be worth our listeners hearing about?
Yeah, I mean, one thing, you struck my interest globally when you said that, because I think one big area my team is focused on is how we think about driving growth for Ellucian globally. And I think one of the interesting parts about that is we talked a lot about technology, and Doug asked like kind of how we save costs, and you kind of asked about how it could drive kind of change. One of the things that I will say, and college or higher ed institutions, or tertiary ed, if you will, which is where it's more commonly known around the world, they vary a ton, right? Like the British Commonwealth countries are pretty similar, but China is a lot different than that, and then South America is different than that, and like there's all permutations more than I know, right? I was just in Dubai, and we visited some people there, and but I think the one thing that strikes me internationally, really two things, is one, I think they're less, as much as it feels sometimes that higher ed in the US is behind technology-wise for maybe other industries, and I think it is, right? I come from a media background, and there's no question there's a big difference. International institutions are even further sort of behind, or using older technologies, maybe a better way to say it. And so I think the opportunity for them to have an impact on not only the schools, but their populations through technology is even greater than it is in the US, right? If you think about one thing that Doug asked when I hijacked the conversation and plugged Paul LeBlanc being on the board, but he was asking effectively about sort of bimodal or multimodal delivery. If you think about countries in Africa, or Australia is another great example, right? Big country, most people in the city, but lots of rural students. If you think about the ability to unlock sort of virtual learning in some of the lower income places in Africa, Australia, which is a wealthier country, but still has a lot of big space, like that is real change for who we can educate and how we educate them. And so I think one of the things we'll see is, I think the technology advancement worldwide will empower, I don't know over what time period, but a real kind of global learning revolution in a way that I think is going to be super positive for the world. I think India is a great example of being on the cutting edge of this, like very big population, very focused on culturally on education, has unlocked some sort of deregulation that enables some systems there. I just think you're going to have a really positive impact just because they're still growing in terms of what technology can do. And I think we talked about our mission. We also have a long-term vision, which I think is, to use Doug words, maybe not profound because it's, but at least interesting. And I think it's unlock learning for all. That's what we talk about at Ellucian as our long-term vision. And I think that technology can really do that in ways that are very direct, very material, and very real over the next like few years. And so that's just one thing I'm excited about. We talk a lot about the problems in higher ed, but there are massive opportunities for growth. There's still a big part of the world that's not as educated as we like them to be, and technology can be the unlocking force for that without being like too dramatic or overstating it. Like that's true. And I think what's really cool is the US institutions, your primary audience, can really be on the cutting edge of helping drive that change by setting an example of how they use technology, how they embrace distance learning, how they embrace new models like we talked about with kind of non-degree credentials. And I'm just really excited to see and hopefully be part of, right? Hopefully Ellucian can play a role in it, of that change that I'm certain is going to happen over the next decade or so.
Wow. He's a smart man, ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Dinski. But another smart man that gets to come along for the ride with me whenever he wants, my guest co-host. He's Douglas Carlson. He's head of partnerships at Lead Squared. And I think my most frequent guest co-host to date over many, many, many episodes we've done together. Douglas, always a pleasure to have you back.
Thanks for having me.
And ladies and gentlemen, our guest of honor, he's headed off to another meeting, I think, at some point right now. He's Jeff Dinski. He is the Chief Strategy and Corporate Development Officer at Ellucian. Jeff, thanks for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp'd. Higher education is evolving. And if you're in marketing and enrollment management, then you need to be at the Insights EDU conference.
That's a fact. That's a fact.
Insights EDU 2025 is happening February 12 through 14 in New Orleans, Louisiana. This is your chance to explore the latest trends in higher education and discover new and innovative strategies to level up your program marketing and enrollment. Hear from some of the best speakers in the industry, from companies like Google, LinkedIn, Adobe, and more. Registration is now open, so secure your spot while early bird pricing is still available.
Hey, everybody. This is Elvin Freitas, co-founder of the EdUp Experience. Did you enjoy that conversation? I hope you did. Did you know that you can actually hear this conversation early on and ad-free? And you can also hear extended episodes, bonus episodes, original content. That's right, original content and invites to special events, all while helping to sustain EdUp. Did you know that? Well, if you didn't know, now you know. To become a subscriber, go to edupexperience.com. That's EDUP experience.com to subscribe to our free email newsletter to learn how you can get access. Again, that's edupexperience.com. That's EDUP experience.com.